Rhain II. The dawn when they woke was grey and cold. They rode back to Nightfall City with haste, and by the time the company reached the cliffs overlooking Nightfall Bay, the mist had burned away into a pale gold haze in the sunlight. Below, the sea gnawed endlessly at the black stone shores, and from the horizon rose the jagged spires of Nightfall Keep, a true capital of the Dusklands, a fortress, a monument to the patriots of the country. Rhain reigned Vesper at the crest of the ridge and looked down upon the citadel his ancestors had carved from the rock. Nightfall Keep was no mere castle. It was a city unto itself. Its towers thrust skyward like black lances, veiled in sea spray and gull cries. The layers of black stone fortified rock walls were 4 layers full of populace and prosperity. Massive curtain walls coiled around the cliffs, attaching themselves to the massive plateaus that bordered the umbral sea, their surfaces slick with salt and dotted with braziers that never went out on the trade routes to Emberfall and various smaller cities and countries in the land of Emberfall. Beyond those walls sprawled the city, a vast, thriving sprawl of stone and slate rooftops cut through by the wide, cobbled arteries of trade. Smoke from forge fires and bakeries rose into the cold air, mingling with the smell of seaweed and burning pitch. At its heart, the keep itself loomed upon a promontory of obsidian rock, a fortress of sweeping arches, sharp towers, and carved gargoyles. Dragons of basalt guarded its gatehouse, and the great bridge of Nightfall arched from the city to the citadel's gate, a masterpiece of stone and sorcery older than the oldest songs. "By the flame of God," murmured Tyvan Marshguard, drawing his hood back, his dark hair damp with sea mist. "It has never felt so good to be in the heart of the Dusklands again." Rhain said nothing, still mourning his father and finding it difficult to focus on anything besides his current circumstances. The sight filled him with both warmth and weight, the warmth of homecoming and the weight of what it now meant to him. His father's keep. Now, his keep. The horns of Nightfall sounded from the watchtowers, 3 long rising notes, and from the lower roads below, the people began to stir. Word of the army's return spread through the city like fire through dry straw. By the time the company reached the outer gates, crowds lined the streets. The great iron gates swung wide, creaking with ancient pride, and House Dusk rode through. Rhain led at the front, Tyvan at his side, followed by Lord Garan Varin and the surviving spears, their armor dulled and blood-stained, their banners heavy with rain. Behind them came the remnants of the Dusk Guard, weary, wounded, but proud. Cheers rose from the crowd, not the wild cry of a festival, but the deep, reverent sound of a people welcoming their defenders home. "Long live House Dusk!" shouted a blacksmith, his face streaked with soot. He struck his hammer against his anvil in salute, sparks leaping high. "Lord Rhain! Lord Rhain has returned!" cried a young woman from a balcony, scattering petals that fell like blood-red snow. The sound struck something deep in him. Not quite joy, not yet grief. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, his face calm, his mind elsewhere. The road wound downward into the lower city. Merchants left their stalls to bow. Beggars pressed to the roadside, murmuring prayers. The smell of fresh bread mingled with the tang of the sea. Human faces made up most of the crowd, but among them, Rhain saw a few slender, long-eared elves cloaked in sea-blue silk, a pair of horned tiefling twins hawking spices from the southern isles, dwarven smiths with arms like stone pillars, pounding at their forges to honor the returning host. Nightfall was alive, loud, mixed, unafraid of its own contradictions. "They love you, my lord. They always have. Now they see it plain. You are your father's son." Rhain's gaze stayed on the road ahead, jaw set. "My father earned their cheers more than I ever could." Tyvan nodded, a faint smile tugging his newly scarred cheek. "I, none braver, none more just. But tonight, my lord, they cheer for hope, and that wears your face now." They rode on. The cheers grew louder. The streets grew narrower. Colorful pennants fluttered from the upper windows. In the shadows of the market arches, women stood, waving cloths and garlands, some laughing through tears. Rhain caught one woman's eyes, green as glass, her hair the color of ripe wheat, her smile bright and trembling. Another leaned forward from a balcony, a silver necklace glinting at her throat. She was calling his name with the lilting accent of the coastal folk. Her lips were painted red. Her gaze lingered. As Rhain rode through the streets of Nightfall, banners of black and gold fluttered from every window, their edges licking the wind like tongues of flame. The people pressed close, hands reaching, voices rising, their cheers washing over him in waves. But it was not the voices he noticed most. It was the eyes of the beautiful women in his city. Women leaned from balconies and doorways, their faces soft with awe and wonder. Some tossed petals, others only looked, eyes bright and unashamed, filled with that strange blend of gratitude and longing that made his pulse quicken. One girl, her breasts pressed up by her apron, still powdered with flour, caught his gaze as he passed the baker's square. She smiled and waved at her liege lord in a submissive and loving way, a simple, fleeting thing. But in that instant, he saw her not as a stranger, but as something elemental. Life, warmth, the promise of touch. Her hair was the color of chestnuts in the rain, her cheeks flushed with work and sunlight. Rhain found himself smiling back before he could stop himself, charmed by her feminine nature, as only a young man can be. Further on, another dark-haired, freckled woman was standing barefoot beside a fishmonger's stall. She lifted a hand in salute, a shy half-wave that lingered longer than it should have. Her beauty was not delicate, but real, shaped by wind and salt and toil. He thought of her standing on the cliffs at dawn, watching the sails return to harbor, and how beautiful she must be. What was it like to be with a woman, Rhain wondered. And then there was a third, a woman wrapped in a shawl of red wool, her eyes green as summer moss. She didn't smile, she only looked at him, a look that struck deeper than all the rest. It was not worship, not even affection. It was understanding and desire. She saw him, not just the Lord of Dusk, but the young man beneath the steel and sigil, a man whom she clearly wanted. He should have looked away. He knew his station, his duty, but he felt it, the raw pull of their gazes, the gravity of the feminine, that mysterious tide that no sword or crown could master. It pulled at something buried deep in him, something more primal than duty and blood. For the first time, Rhain understood what his father must have meant when he said that a lord does not command hearts, he endures them. The thought humbled him, even as it thrilled him. He straightened in his saddle, feeling the eyes upon him, the mix of reverence and hunger that burned hotter than any torch. His heart thundered. The air smelled of sea salt, sweat, and crushed flowers. The cheers of the crowd blurred into a single, living heartbeat. He was young, alive, and suddenly aware that the world could fall in love with him. As dangerous as it is exhilarating, he knew. A heavy hand clapped his armored shoulder, Garin Varin grinning through his beard. "They'll name you the Flameborn before the year is out, my Lord Rhain. Never seen the folk so alive. They recognize your prowess and leadership, as you led the charge when your father fell honorably. You're truly the heir of dusk in all aspects." Rhain forced a smile. "I broke the very code they now celebrate, and still they call it honor. This victory belongs to us all. I did not defeat them alone. The spears were right behind me, as were you, Lord Garin. You never flinched, which is more than I can say for Lord Thalon." From a nearby tavern door came another voice, a broad, red-nosed man with a mug in each hand. "To Lord Rhain Dusk, Slayer of the Orion Lord, Keeper of the Vale, Lord of the Dusklands," he roared, and the crowd echoed the toast. "Lord Rhain, Lord of the Dusklands." Rhain gave a curt nod, dismounting briefly to clasp the man's shoulder. "Drink to peace," he said, "and remember those who can't." The man nodded, chastened, tears brightening his ale-slicked cheeks. A little farther on, an old woman, her back bent, her eyes teary, reached out a trembling hand as he passed. Rhain slowed Vesper so she could touch his boot. "The Maker keep you, my lord," she whispered. "Your father watches in the flame." What an honorable man, our late Lord of Dusk. God keep his flame for eternity. It's curious how quickly information travels, Rhain pondered. Rhain felt his throat tighten. "And may the flame light your hearth," he answered softly, then rode on with his company. Some of the men fell out of ranks and moved toward their barracks as they passed the third gate and entered the blacksmithing district, where most soldiers sworn to House Dusk lived. As the men dismounted and led their horses toward the stables, the crowd surged. Women pushed forward, searching for faces. Hope and fear mingled in their eyes, for some would find no one waiting. But when a woman found her beloved among the returning men, she ran to him, laughing and crying at once, covering him with kisses and trembling hands. That is a beautiful sight to see, Rhain thought. Next came a band of smiths to greet their new liege, their aprons scorched, hands blackened by forge ash, pride gleaming brighter than their steel. One among them, an older dwarf with a bald crown and burned scars running like rivers down his chin, raised a freshly forged blade high into the light. "House Dusk stands eternal," he cried, voice raw with devotion. "A flame that cannot be extinguished." Rhain reined in Vesper and inclined his head. "We are only as strong as the steel we carry into battle," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "And no steel in all the realms is truer than that born of Dusk's forges, or of the hands that shape it." The dwarf flushed crimson, his rough fingers trembling as he wiped a tear from his soot-streaked face. The smiths erupted in cheers, the cry swelling through the square. "Lord of Dusk! Lord of Dusk!" Rhain felt the sound strike something deep within him. Not pride, but belonging. Even through grief, the people's faith burned steadily. The Dusklands, for all their scars and sorrow, still glowed with a kind of magic. Unity forged in loss and tempered in loyalty. Tyvan laughed beside him. "You've roused the forges of half the city already. Careful, they'll build you a statue before sundown." Rhain did not laugh, but he smiled at Tyvan knowingly. His gaze lingered on the black towers of Nightfall Keep, now growing closer. The sunlight touched the highest parapets and made them burn like gold. As they neared the upper bridge, one of the younger soldiers, a lad who'd ridden under Rhain's banner in the Vale, turned in his saddle and asked quietly, "My lord, have you had word of Sir Timothy Thalen?" Rhain's eyes narrowed. "No," the soldier swallowed. "He vanished the night after the battle. Some say he went west, others should keep their tongues still," Tywin cut in sharply. "Lord Stephen Thalen was a loyal man." "Was," Rhain said under his breath. The word hung there like smoke. They said no more after that. At last, the procession reached the bridge to the keep. From here, the sea churned below, dark waves hammering the rocks. The bridge itself was wide enough for 5 men abreast, lined with statues of the Dusk Lords of old, each carved with obsidian faces, half-eaten by time. Above the gatehouse, the great crimson banner of House Dusk snapped in the salt wind, the eclipsed sun upon its field of blood-red cloth. As Rhain crossed beneath it, the people bowed. Bells rang from the towers, and though his heart ached for the first time since his father's death, he let the moment settle in his chest. Heavy, imperfect, real. He was home. The road to Nightfall Keep bent upward in a long curve of stone and sunlight. The banners along the outer wall stirred lazily in the wind, their crimson folds catching the light as if stitched with fire. From the gatehouse came the low groan of chains, the portcullis rising, the drawbridge descending with a thunder of iron. The moat beneath glittered like a river of glass. Clear water rushed through the channels that fed it from the northern springs, and the reflection of the castle's black towers rippled upon its surface. The smell of salt and wildflower carried on the breeze. Rhain Dusk sat astride his stallion, Vesper at the head of the column. His armor had been polished for the return, though the dents of battle still marred the breastplate. Behind him rode Tywin Marshguard, and behind Tywin came the surviving captains of the Dusk Guard, Laramie Vane, broad-shouldered and handsome in his dented helm, Titus, a grizzled veteran with a crooked smile, and Garin Varen, quiet-eyed, his battle axe hooked to his backplate still, with his buckler tied to his cloak. Lord Varen departed to his gatehouse with his men as they began to unfasten their gear and dismount. The guards upon the walls saluted as the company approached. Spears were raised in rhythm, a sound like rain upon shields. The portcullis groaned upward, and there he was, Johnny Old Iron Keld, hunched beside the winch with his ring of keys clattering at his hip. The sea wind tugged at his grey hair, and his eyes shone bright beneath heavy brows. "Thank God and his flame," Johnny rasped, voice rough as gravel. "Am I glad to see you, lad?" Rhain smiled faintly, reining Vesper to a halt before the gate. "It's good to see you still breathing, Old Iron." "Aye," Johnny said, grinning through the lines of age. "Someone's got to keep the gate standing while the lords go off winning wars, L." Rhain's gaze softened. "You kept it well. My father would have thanked you." The old man's grin faltered, and he lowered his head. "Your father never needed to thank me, my lord. It was he who gave me this post, and you who gave me reason to keep it. I owe God and your father all I ever had." Rhain nodded, holding back tears, grief tightening his throat as the great doors swung wide. "Then keep it a while longer, Johnny. The Dusklands needs every man who remembers what loyalty means." Vesper stepped forward, his hooves drumming across the planks. Rhain glanced to either side as they passed. He saw the reflections of the towers tremble in the moat's depths and the shimmer of sunlight upon the water. Beyond the bridge rose the inner curtain wall, its surface black and polished, as if it were cut from obsidian. Silver runes traced the parapets, catching the afternoon light like starlight. The great gate of the inner keep loomed ahead, its arch carved with twin suns, one radiant, one shadowed, the sigil of House Dusk. When they entered, the courtyard opened before them like the heart of a fortress city. Servants and squires poured out to greet them and handle Vesper and the other horses, their cries rising in a chorus. Lord Rhain returns. House Dusk endures. Flower petals rained from the balconies, scattered by the wind. Armor clanged, children cheered, and the smell of roast and mead drifted faintly from the kitchens. The doors of the Hall of the Eclipse stood open. From within came the dim shimmer of firelight and the murmur of voices. Tywin's lips curved into a faint smile. It would seem the whole court has missed you, my lord. Rhain dismounted, boots meeting the stone with measured weight. They miss their lord, he said. I am not he, but his duty is mine now. Tywin's brow creased, but he gave no reply, only a quiet nod of respect. Rhain climbed the steps to the great hall of the Eclipse slowly. He could already hear voices and stirring louder with each step. The ironwork doors towered above him, each panel carved with the history of House Dusk, wars, coronations, oaths sworn and broken, the store of the entire northeastern coast of Emberfall. He placed his hand upon the cool metal and pushed. The hall breathed open. It was vast, the ceiling a lattice of black oak and silver beams, the walls lined with tall windows of stained glass. Afternoon light poured through them in fractured colors, red and gold and white, painting the black marble floor in streaks of blood and sunlight. Great braziers burned along the aisles, their smoke curling toward the rafters like thin veils. Sunlight poured through the tall windows as Rhain walked the corridor, his steps soft against the stone. One tapestry caught his eye, a weave of gold and shadow showing the first Emberfall. The sky torn open, fire raining down, and a single keep standing untouched beneath a figure of silver wings. The Watcher, the old stories called it, one of the Solari who shielded the faithful when the world burned. His father used to say, House Dusk was born beneath those wings, spared not for strength, but for faith. Along the edge, faded words glimmered. When the ember fell, the faithful did not burn. Rhain studied them for a moment, sunlight dancing across the thread, then moved on, the feeling of unseen eyes lingering on his back as he went. At the far end, upon the raised dais, stood the twin thrones, the greater one forged of black iron and ruby glass, shaped like a sun, devoured by its own light, and beside it, the smaller throne of silver and pearl, the seat of the Lady of Nightfall. The court had gathered already. Nobles, captains, and merchants filled the benches, all rising as Rhain entered. The air was thick with voices, the din of cups and boots, the rustle of silk. And at the center, waiting beneath the banners trimmed in mourning black, stood Lady Martha Dusk. Her gown was of deep violet satin, edged with gray, the colors of remembrance. A narrow coronet of silver rested upon her brow. Her face, though lined with years and grief, held its regal strength. When she saw Rhain, her expression softened, not with pity, but with fierce, silent pride. Rhain, she said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. He went to her. She stepped forward, her hand rising to touch his cheek, a gesture both tender and commanding. You have returned, my son. God of creation has kept you. I did what father would have wished, Rhain said quietly. hoping that was true. Her eyes glimmered. Your father was a man of honor. You are a man of will. Both are needed. And now, House Dusk has both in memory and in flesh. How does she know what happened? The question coiled in his mind like smoke. Lady Careth's spies saw far, farther than any mortal should. She drew herself upright, facing the gathered court. Behold the Lord of Nightfall. The line of dusk stands unbroken. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. The soldiers keeping guard struck their swords against their shields, shouting Rhain's name. Rhain Dusk, King of the Eclipse, Lord of the Dusklands. House Dusk forever, they chanted. Rhain stood still beneath it, the sound like thunder around him. He nodded once, neither smiling nor scowling, his heart a quiet storm. From the high tables came laughter and music, a sudden flourish of strings. The jester, Lute, bounded into the open, dressed in motley crimson and gold. His bells chimed with each step. The bards began a tune as Lute began his song. Oh, gather round, you duskborn all, and hear the tale of Zenith's fall, where Western pride came dressed in gold and found the night too dark, too bold. From Solara's keep rode Lord Alaric bright, his banners ablazing with the light. He swore by dawn, by flame, by fame, but left the field without his name. He charged with solstice, shining true, and thought the dusk would kneel on cue. But when Rhain's host met him in kind, he found his dawn had gone behind. He cried, "The gods will grant me grace." But God was watching Rhain's embrace. For justice favors not the loud, but those who stand when dust and shroud. Oh, solstice sang, then slipped away, betrayed its lord before the fray. Now Duskland's forge holds morning's gleam. The sun belongs to Rhain's great dream. The spears of Marshguard, fierce and tall, stood laughing loud at Alaric's fall. He rode for light, they cried in glee, but dusk was all his eyes could see. They say his helm rolled down the hill, and still there, searching for him still. His charger fled, his pride took flight, and left his dawn to fade to night. So raise your cups, ye shadowed halls, to Rhain, the Lord of Zenith Falls. For where the proud once sought to reign, the sun now bows before Lord Rhain. The court howled with laughter and cheers. Lute danced, spinning his cap and leaping upon a table. His jests continued. He said, "I'll duel for love, for light," but forgot that dusk devours bright. He swung his sword, he missed his chance, and fell before Rhain's shining lance. Tankards slammed against tables. Men cheered. Even Lady Martha smiled, though faintly. Rhain forced himself to nod, to show approval to the entertainers. But inside, the laughter scraped like sand. He felt the heat rise in his chest. Not shame exactly, but a restless unease. Lute's story cut too close to something raw. Lord Orion died with honor, Rhain thought unwillingly. Lady Careth's voice came from behind the laughter, low, measured, and amused. "The boy sings too loud for a fool," she said, as she approached. She was a striking woman, tall, lithe, with hair the color of midnight and eyes like cold fire. Her gown was deep green, the sigil of her house a silver falcon pinned at her shoulder. She moved with the easy grace of someone who had learned to kill quietly. "Lady Careth," Rhain said, inclining his head. "My lord." Her smile was faint. "It seems I am not the first to greet you home, though word of your father's passing reached us before your banners." Rhain's gaze sharpened. Before my banners? News travels swiftly when carried by wings, she said lightly. My rangers keep watch from coast to coast. It is my duty to know what the winds whisper. Tywin stepped forward. And what else do they whisper, my lady? Her eyes flicked toward him. That Sir Timothy Tharlan rides south alone. 2 nights past, bound for Emberfall. No retinue, no banner, no word left behind. The laughter around them dulled slightly, as if the words had weight even in the noise. Rhain's jaw tightened. He left without leave. So it seems. Tywin's voice dropped. House Thalen would not betray House Dusk. Would he not? Lady Careth's tone was mild, curious in his choice to leave the battle in the middle of the evening. A murmur rippled through nearby courtiers. Rhain caught the edge of it. The whispers, the glances, the confusion. He said, evenly, "We'll discuss this later, in council." "As you wish, my lord." She dipped her head, eyes unreadable. As she withdrew, the jester struck another chord, and laughter rolled back through the hall. The moment passed. At least outwardly, Tywin leaned closer. "The vultures already circle, my lord." "I know," Rhain murmured. "Let them circle. I'll decide who eats." He moved toward the dais. The steps to the Eclipse throne felt steeper than he remembered. Each footfall echoed in the vaulted space until the hall seemed to listen. He reached the seat, his father's seat, and paused. The iron shimmered in the torchlight, alive with crimson veins. The sigil of House Dusk glowed faintly on the backrest, a crimson moon, more than half consumed by an eclipse. Rhain turned, looking out across the gathered faces. For the first time, he saw what his father must have seen every day, the crowd that loved him, feared him, depended on him. And he felt, beneath the pride and the ceremony, a sharp edge of solitude. But he knew what he must do at this moment. Rhain stood in front of his father's seat, the laughter of the hall dimming to a hush as his hand found the hilt of Solstice. When he drew it, the sound was unlike any blade born of mortal forge. A clear, singing note like sunlight given voice. The steel shimmered white, bright steel, chased through with veins of molten gold that caught the light and scattered it across the hall. Its edge was flawless, its balance divine, as if it had never known defeat. The gilded crossguard gleamed with symbols of the Maker's flame, and the leather hilt fit Rhain's hand as though it had waited an age for him alone. When he raised Solstice, the air seemed to still, the lords and small folk alike gazing upon it in reverent silence, as though witnessing the very light of heaven bound in steel. The roar that followed shook the rafters. Nightfall endures, Lord Rhain of House Dusk. He lifted a hand, and the noise subsided. Nightfall endures, he said quietly, his voice steady. And so long as I draw breath, it shall. Tywin bowed deeply. Lady Martha's eyes glistened with fierce pride. Lady Careth watched him with a calculating calm, as though measuring the shape of his ambition. And somewhere in the hall's shadows, the jester's laughter lingered, bright, mocking, echoing. As the hall quieted and the chatter softened to a respectful murmur, Lady Careth's polite request reached him through the hum of voices. The council wished a session immediately, pressing enough to warrant his attention before the feast. So, once unarmored, bathed, and dressed in his black and silver attire, Lord Rhain Dusk made his way to the council chamber, where the council waited patiently behind closed doors for Tywin and Rhain to join them. The council chamber breathed of old stone and candle smoke. Banners of House Dusk hung from the vaulted ribs above, black silk trimmed in gold, each emblazoned with the eclipsed sun. Rhain's father had once said that every flicker of light in this hall was stolen from darkness. Tonight, the darkness seemed to want it back. When Rhain entered, the council rose. The sound of their chairs scraping against the floor was sharp, final. His father's seat, the high-backed chair of iron-bound oak, waited at the head of the round table. For a heartbeat, Rhain hesitated before it. The polish still bore the faint sheen of oil where Corvic Dusk's hands had rested for years. He sat, the weight of the chair pressed against his shoulders like the memory of armor. "Be seated," he said. The words came evenly, though his chest felt tight. They obeyed. Tywin Marshguard sat to his right, armored still, helm at his side. Lady Alessandra Careth to his left, all grace and precision, her dark eyes fixed upon him as though she could already read his mind. Around the table sat the others, Admiral Jorek Strathen, sun-scarred and silver-bearded, Master Lorik, the treasurer with fingers stained in ink, Garin Varin, broad as ever and looking tougher than before the battle, scars on his fat chin and a heavily bandaged arm. His mother, Lady Martha Dusk, quietly dignified in mourning black, pearls woven through her hair like drops of pale light, stood and paced in front of the burning fireplace. As she stood watching the council in between, staring deeply into the fire, Lady Careth was the first to break the silence. "My lord," she began, voice soft but cutting, "news from the south. The Grok Vashar have crossed into the misty plains. My scouts near Ravenhall sent word before their lines fell quiet." Rhain lifted his gaze. "The Grok Vashar? From Varkun? Raiders? How far into the plains?" "Too far," she answered. "They move fast, razing outer villages. If Ravenhall falls, the Dustlands will soon feel their breath on our necks. Not just raiders. This is a large, unprecedented host of these beasts, the likes of which has not been seen in the land for 2 generations. The murmurs around the table swelled. Garin cursed beneath his breath. The Admiral shifted uneasily. "How certain are you of this?" Rhain asked. "Your messengers seem to know more than most High Lords and Kings." Her lips curved faintly. "Your father trusted my eyes where his could not see. Shall I take it that his son does not?" Tywin bristled at her boldness, but Rhain raised a hand. "You've served this house long, Lady Careth. I question no one's loyalty, only their shadows." "Then let the shadows work," she said smoothly. "That is what you keep me for." Rhain exhaled through his nose, letting the tension settle. The rhythm of this hall was not his yet. Every voice still seemed to echo Lord Corvin's. "My father's last wish," he said at length, "was to raise a garrison at Zenith Falls. He swore no Orien banner would ever rise there again. That oath still binds me." Tywin nodded. "The men would follow you, my lord. They'd raise the walls with their own hands if you asked them." But Lorik's quill froze above his parchment. "A garrison, my lord, will bleed us dry. Stone, food, soldiers' pay, all when the coffers still groan from the campaign. We should preserve our wealth, not bury it in mortar." Lady Careth leaned forward. "And while you build, Ravenhall burns. We can send aid now. Riders, steel. My Carethmen are already scouting good places to garrison. Anything to hold the line against these blackbloods." Admiral Strathen's gravelled voice joined hers. "The sea's restless. Pirates sniff at our ports. If Ravenhall falls and the Vasha turn west, we'll need ships ready to take them out at the source. The sea they spawn from, not walls inland." Lady Careth interjected, "My eyes see the seas are filled with an unnatural mist that does not cease. Bringing my lord's navy to Ravenhall could be a risk we cannot abide." The debate swirled around him, words like waves breaking against the stone walls. Rhain felt his father's absence like a hollow at the center of it all. Corvick would have spoken by now with that measured certainty that made men believe even the impossible was strategy. But Corvick was gone, and the councillors at this table looked to him. He stood. The candlelight caught the gold in his hair, the steel in his eyes. "The garrison will rise," he said. "It will not be grand, not yet, but the first stones will be set before the month's end. Zenith Falls will stand guard over our western border. That was my father's charge, and I'll see it done. It shall serve as our outlet south. I will not abandon the Ravens, but I seek more information about these threats." He let the silence breathe, then continued. "We will send aid to Ravenhall, food, medicine, and scouts at dawn, but no soldiers. Not until I know the enemy's reach and our own strength. The Navy will be cautious, but proceed as Admiral Stratton sees fit. Be cautious, my dear Lord Stratton. If these mists are unnatural, use every caution." The Admiral nodded with approval. Lady Careth bowed her head, just enough to be polite. "Then may your foresight match your father's." Lorik scribbled a note, muttering about expenses. Garin gave a single grunt of approval. "Lord of Dusk," he added. As the council finished discussing smaller matters, the committee soon came to an end, and the councillors continued their conversation as Rhain stood and walked to his mother in front of the fire. As she turned to him, she met his eyes with quiet pride. "You chose as your father would have," she said softly, firm but fair. He wanted to believe her. His father's voice came back, not in words, but in weight, the same weight now resting on Rhain's shoulders. "If I falter," he thought, "the shadow that follows me will not be his. It will be my own." The night came gilded in gold and flame. By the time the great bells of Nightfall Keep tolled for the feast, the sun had slipped beneath the umbral sea. Lanterns hung from every archway, each wrapped in violet silk, the color of House Dusk in mourning. The banners of the black sun and crescent moon drifted in the evening wind, their shadows long and wavering over the courtyard stones. Inside, the Hall of the Eclipse had been transformed. The long tables were heavy with roasted pheasant, venison glazed with plum, and fresh loaves steaming beside bowls of salted butter. Silver goblets lined the tables like mirrors, catching the firelight from the great chandelier above, a wheel of iron holding 100 candles that made the air shimmer. Rhain entered dressed in dark crimson trimmed with black, a cloak clasped at the shoulder with the eclipse sigil. Tyvan followed beside him in his own finery, dark blue with the marshguard crest of the crossing spears that Rhain was fond of. Lady Martha Dusk was already seated at the high table, a vision of serene mourning. Her gown black as jet, but her hair pinned with white pearls that glimmered softly in the candlelight. To her right sat Admiral Jorek Stratton, sober and straight-backed, his uniform freshly pressed, medals gleaming faintly. To her left, Master Lorik Anselm, his ledger set aside for once, hands folded primly before him. Across from them, Lady Careth watched the room from beneath her dark hood, eyes moving like a falcon's over every guest and whispered word. But when Rhain entered, all rose. "Hail, Lord Rhain Dusk," someone called, and the hall erupted into applause, the kind that rolled like thunder beneath the vaulted ceiling. The music struck up, a slow tune at first, strings and pipes, swelling into a melody that filled the hall like sunlight. Rhain lifted his goblet slightly, in acknowledgement, but did not smile. "Be seated," he said, his voice carrying with the authority of his father, but the weight of his youth. As the people sat, Father Arvin Callan, High Priest of Emberfall, stepped forward from the dais. His robes were crimson and ash-grey, his long silver hair bound at the nape of his neck. He carried a staff, topped with a sunstone, that flickered faintly like a dying ember. He bowed before Rhain, then turned to the gathered lords and ladies. "Brothers and sisters of Emberfall," he began, his voice low and grave, "we gather tonight not only in triumph, but in remembrance. Lord Corvin Dusk, father, lord, warrior, and servant of the God of creation, stood where all men fear to stand. He faced death, not for pride or glory, but for peace, for the safety of his house, his people, and his family." The hall quieted. Even the torches seemed to dim in reverence. "May the God of the flame temper his soul anew," the priest continued, "and cast him again into the stars, a light to guide us in the long dark." He raised his goblet to Lord Corvin Dusk, the unbroken flame of the night. The hall echoed with the toast. "To Lord Corvin." Rhain drank, and though the wine was sweet, it burned his throat. His gaze wandered toward his mother, calm and proud, and beside her sat his sister, Rhain Dusk, the youngest of the line. Rhain was barely 15, her hair a pale chestnut that caught the candlelight like autumn leaves. She clung to Rhain's arm as he sat beside her, eyes red but bright. "Tell me of him," she whispered, when the laughter returned to the hall. "How did he die, truly?" Rhain's heart tightened. "He died as he lived," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Bravely, protecting our people and me." She blinked, fighting tears. "Did he suffer?" Rhain hesitated. "No. It was quick," he lied gently. "He met the enemy with steel in hand and the name of Emberfall on his lips." Rhain nodded, trying to smile. "He'd have liked that." "He would have," Rhain murmured, "and he would have wanted you to smile tonight. To be strong." She squeezed his hand, and for a brief moment, the burden of lordship felt lighter, replaced by the warmth of family, the fragile, fleeting comfort of being simply her brother. Then came the laughter, the louder kind, courtly and careless. The music had shifted. The feast had begun in earnest. 3 noblewomen caught Rhain's eye as the evening unfolded: the cut of a man's cloak, the ring upon a lady's hand, the subtle weight of silence in a hall. Yet as the evening deepened and laughter echoed off marble and wineglass alike, his attention kept slipping from duty to curiosity. Celia Norwin glimmered like molten copper, every movement catching the light, every smile a spark. Her hair was deep auburn, her lips too red, her beauty too deliberate to ignore. Vera Holland was all symmetry and poise. Pale skin, eyes like clear frost, her hair bound in a style that left nothing uncertain. Even her stillness was elegant. And Ilara Wynn, soft gold hair, loose about her shoulders, eyes the calm grey of river stone. No jewels save a single sapphire, no artifice. Yet Rhain thought her the most luminous of them all. He told himself it was foolish. The son of Lord Dusk had no business staring after these women. And yet, as the music rose and laughter filled the hall again, his gaze found her once more. Not the richest, not the most cunning, but perhaps the only one who seemed to have his heart would be the first to approach him, Ilara. She caught his eye across the table and smiled, small and knowing. "You've not changed, Rhain Dusk," she said when he finally came near. Her voice was soft, melodic, threaded with familiarity. "And you've grown lovelier than I remember," he said, meaning every word. She laughed, brushing a blonde curl from her beautiful face. "You always did know how to say the right thing. I am glad you're safe and home. Your father will be missed." By all, she smiled so sweetly, Rhain couldn't contain the foolish look on his face. He caught himself wondering what their children might look like, if they'd have her deep grey eyes, her quiet smile. The thought struck him like sunlight through cloud, sudden and certain. He wanted that future, and he wanted it with her. Tywin joined them briefly, and one of the ladies, Lady Celia, quickly turned her charm on him, her smile playful. "Sir Marshguard, they say you slew a dozen men at Zenith Falls. Tell me, did you count them, or were you too busy posing for the bards?" Tywin laughed, unoffended. "If I'd known bards were watching, my lady, I'd have struck a better pose." The table erupted in laughter, and even Rhain smiled faintly. The feast carried on deep into the night. Songs of victory, toasts to the fallen, murmured flirtations beneath the candlelight. For a while, Nightfall Keep felt alive again, as if the ghosts of grief had been banished by the warmth of food, fire, and music. When the last song faded, Rhain slipped away to the balcony overlooking the sea. The night was cool, and the stars shimmered over the dark waters below. Tywin joined him, a half-empty goblet in hand. "Your father would have been proud," Tywin said quietly. Rhain leaned against the railing. "He'd have told me I was too proud." Tywin chuckled. "Aye, but he'd have meant it kindly." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of waves echoing faintly from the cliffs. Then Rhain said, "What do you make of Thalin's disappearance?" Tywin's jaw tightened. "I don't like it. The man leaves in the dead of night, doesn't speak a word, and now Kareth says he's headed for Emberhold." Rhain nodded. "Alone. No word, no leave asked." Tywin's voice dropped low. "He was my friend. I don't know what he's doing, but I know trouble when I smell it." "Then we will be ready," Rhain said. Tywin raised his cup. "To the fallen, and to what comes next." Rhain clinked his goblet softly against his friend's. "To what comes next." The umbral sea wind rose, scattering the candlelight below into trembling stars.